November 22nd, 2018, a woman gets a call from her boyfriend asking her to drive to his house to help him clean something up. And when she gets there, she finds blood splattered all over the walls, the floor, the furniture, and she hears his 1-year-old daughter crying in the next room. And she doesn't scream, she doesn't call the police. Instead, she starts cleaning. Now, before we start, I just want to put it out there that researching this case in some aspects was a little bit difficult for me. I think I really struggled with just the investigation part of this case because some things were so technical. So I'm going to really try my best to keep it as simple as possible. And another thing, there is a lot of people in this case that have names starting with the letter K. There's like 3 of them. So I'll also try my best to not mix that up too much. I hope you guys can understand. And if you guys enjoy my content, make sure you guys like the video. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Jasmine, and I do weekly true crime videos, so make sure you guys subscribe to stay up to date. You know, when you grow up with someone for many, many years, you've gone to high school with them and you grew up in the same place and you like the same things, and you can't help but start developing a little bit of a crush on said person. Well, this was exactly the case for Crystal Kennedy and this guy called Patrick Frazee. They've known each other since 2006, but this case takes place in 2016, so they've known each other for well over a decade at the time that our story takes place. Now, before I talk about Crystal and Patrick's relationship, because it is very complicated in a lot of ways, I want to talk about Crystal a little bit. At the time of our story, Crystal was working as a nurse. She grew up in Idaho. She lived there pretty much her whole life, and she was very much a country girl. She loved working with horses and performing with horses, taking care of them, and she was known as the rodeo queen. That was like her nickname. That was what everyone knew her as. Now, Patrick Frazee, they kind of grew up together. They knew each other for over a decade. Like I had said before, they've known each other since high school. And because of that, their relationship was pretty much on and off over the years. By 2016, their relationship had rekindled again. And I'm not going to get into too much detail as to how this happened, but it did get serious enough that Crystal did end up becoming pregnant with his child, but Patrick didn't want to keep the child. So they had a conversation about it. This really strained their relationship. I don't really think they were on the same page with things. I think Crystal was leaning more towards wanting this child and wanting to, be in a long-term committed relationship with Patrick, but he didn't really want that. So she ended up getting an abortion. And to make matters worse for Crystal, she actually found out that Patrick had a fiance this whole time, a woman named Kelsey Barrett, and they had a 1-year-old daughter together called Kaylee. So when Crystal found out about this, obviously she was completely heartbroken and devastated. Like, oh, you don't want a child with me? You wanted me to get an abortion, but here you are seeing someone else, you're engaged to someone else and have a child with them? But the thing is, Patrick kind of had a way at explaining things away. He was really good at telling Crystal exactly what she wanted to hear, and therefore he was very good at like twisting the narrative to suit his needs, if that makes sense. So he kind of told her, hey, don't worry, Crystal. In fact, things with me and Kelsey haven't been working out. Like, our relationship has been in the dumps for a very, very long time, and I want out of the relationship, and you're gonna help me make that happen. Now, we know a little bit about Crystal and Patrick, but who exactly was Kelsey Barrett? And how did her and Patrick end up together? So in 2016, she was living in Washington State, and she's a very independent, very smart woman. She was building a career as a flight instructor. She was very good at what she did. And even though her career was going very well, she wanted more out of life. She wanted to, start dating. So she went on some dating apps, and as she was scrolling, this is when she came across Patrick's profile, and he immediately kind of stood out to her because he was a cowboy, and Kelsey had a type for that. She really liked cowboys, and she could see that he was a cattle rancher. He was from Florissant, Colorado, and he lived a very quiet, laid back country lifestyle. And this lifestyle very much appealed to her. She really liked that. But the unfortunate thing was that they were doing long distance. So after they had matched very quickly, I think just a couple of weeks after meeting online, they started talking and they got really involved with one another. But of course, they were long distance, so they just texted and called. There was thousands of miles between them. But within 1 year of, meeting and talking and everything, she made the decision to move to Colorado from Washington State to be with him. And she relocated to a specific place in Colorado called Woodland Park, which was around 25 miles which is a 35 to 40-minute drive away from where Patrick lived. So, yeah, 1 year of meeting someone online and moving states for them is a pretty huge deal. But it seems like things were kind of working out for them because in October of 2017, that was when their daughter Kaylee was born. They got engaged. So things were clearly going well for them, you would think. But it was a little strange because they never lived together. So even though they were engaged and had a child together, they still had separate homes. And Kelsey oftentimes had to commute back and forth, which was up to a 40-minute drive with a newborn baby. Like, it's not very efficient. So obviously, this is a little bit of a weird situation. And I dug into this a little bit more because I wanted to find out, like, why did they not live together? And it turns out that Kelsey didn't really get along well with Patrick's family. Patrick lived on a cattle ranch with his family, like his mom, his siblings. So they always saw Kelsey in a kind of negative light because her work required her to have really late hours because she was a flight instructor. So sometimes she would go over to Patrick's house late at night and they would call her a hooker because of it. Doesn't really make sense to me because that's literally just her work schedule, but perhaps their family is very conservative or traditional. So they just didn't really like her. They didn't get along well with her at all. And not only that, Kelsey was a very independent person and she did move all the way to Colorado to be with Patrick. But it also seemed like she was very focused on still building her own life, focused on her career, her child, and she had her own place. So in that aspect, I guess that also makes sense. But by 2018, it did seem like things between her and Patrick were becoming very, very strained to the point that people around them were even starting to notice this, especially Crystal. For months now, long after Kelsey had moved to Colorado to be with Patrick, throughout this time, while their relationship was kind of crumbling, Patrick would be telling Crystal things about Kelsey, like saying things were really bad in their relationship, but he was also telling her that Kelsey was extremely abusive to their daughter and that their daughter wasn't safe and was being severely abused. And Patrick wanted to do something about it. He wanted to make sure that his daughter was going to be safe. So you might be thinking, right? Like looking at this type of situation, like what would a normal person do? You know, if your partner was abusing your child, I would think you'd call the police, you know, maybe contact CPS, like tell family members, tell somebody so you can get out of that situation. But no, he doesn't do any of those things. Patrick decided to jump to the most extreme solution possible for his issue. And instead of actually taking, you know, any action himself, he asked Crystal to do his dirty work for him. Now, you might be thinking, like, what exactly did Patrick ask Crystal to do for him? Well, get ready because he asked her to do a bunch of crazy things. So in September of 2018, Patrick came to Crystal with a plan. So the first plan happened in September of 2018. Patrick goes to Crystal and tells her to lace Kelsey's favorite Starbucks drink, which was a caramel macchiato. And remember, Crystal is a nurse, so she had access to prescription drugs. And so Patrick wanted Crystal to lace Kelsey's coffee with Ambien and Valium enough to the point that it would drive her to having an overdose. And the plan was simple. He wanted her to deliver this coffee to her home. But the thing is, Crystal didn't even live in Colorado. She lived in Idaho. And that's a 12-hour drive, by the way, from where Crystal lived all the way to where Kelsey lived. So Crystal did this 12-hour drive, had the caramel macchiato, pretended to be a new neighbor that moved into Kelsey's neighborhood, goes up to her front door, knocks on it, and is like, hey, like I just moved into the neighborhood and I brought you a coffee. They chat for a bit. Kelsey takes a drink and goes inside. Like she's completely trusting and unsuspecting. Like, yeah, she did think it was a little bit weird at first, but didn't think too much about it. And that was that. But the thing is, Crystal never actually poisoned the coffee. She never put drugs into it because she just couldn't bring herself to do it. And when Patrick found out that his initial plan had failed, he was absolutely furious with Crystal. So in October of 2018, this is when Patrick came up with his second plan. And this one was definitely a lot more brutal than the first. Patrick gave Crystal a metal pipe and basically told her, go to Kelsey's townhouse and basically beat her to death with it. Hit her in the head, but make sure there isn't a lot of blood. Which to me doesn't make any sense because you want her to make sure there isn't a lot of blood all over the place, but you're giving her a metal pipe to beat her to death with it, which is like a really brutal way to take someone out. And it's very messy. And even though this is a crazy request, Kelsey did it. So she drove to Woodland Park again, and she was sat in her car right outside of Kelsey's townhouse, kind of like sitting in the car contemplating what to do, you know, kind of like trying to, you know, work herself up to go in and do this deed and be like, okay, you got this. but she just couldn't bring herself to do it. While she was there, she was so hesitant, and she just heard like a dog barking and there's people all around her. It was the middle of the day. So she ended up getting spooked, and she decided like I can't actually go through with it. I can't do this. So she drove off, went to Patrick's ranch and told him like, "Hey, I just can't go through with it." And left the metal pipe in his driveway and was just like, there's way too many people. Now, this is all really crazy. The fact that Patrick is asking his secret girlfriend to kill his fiance for him is insane. But on top of that, it's so much more complicated because Crystal was actually babysitting Kaylee. So Crystal and Kelsey had never met. They don't know each other besides the time that Crystal brought coffee to Kelsey's place. And Kelsey doesn't even know that this woman is her fiance's secret girlfriend who also sometimes babysits her daughter. Crazy, right? But that was because when Patrick had Kaylee in his care, Crystal would be around. So she would take care of Kaylee, she would babysit her. And it was weird because when Crystal would hang out with Kaylee, she was like, Patrick always tells me that she's being severely abused and that she's in a terrible situation with her mother, but there was never any signs of, trauma. There was never any bruise marks around her. Like Kaylee seemed like a genuinely really healthy and happy kid. And because what Crystal was seeing wasn't aligning with Patrick's claims, this started causing a lot of doubt in her mind. And she started really hesitating on Patrick's requests. So, a lot of the reason why Crystal, it seemed like, couldn't go through with the first two requests was because she wasn't really sure if she could trust Patrick. But it was really tough for her. And look, I'm not saying I sympathize with her. This is kind of a complicated case overall. Like her involvement in this has caused a lot of conversation. There's a lot of debate about her, and I won't get too into that just yet. But explaining the situation fully, Patrick would heavily criticize Crystal and basically emotionally abuse her because Crystal could never go through with his requests. But even then, right, at the end of the day, Crystal never really did anything about the situation. She was very passive about everything. Because later on in October of 2018, this was when Patrick had a third and somewhat final request for Crystal. And this time she had to, again, drive from Idaho to Colorado, another 12-hour trip. And this time, instead of a metal pipe, she had a baseball bat in her car. And the intention was going to be the same, to use it on Kelsey, to make sure she was unsuspecting and to go over to her place and I guess beat her to death with it. But again, Crystal could not go through with it. She was like, I just can't do this. So at this point, we have 3 attempts, 3 failures. Crystal literally drove thousands of miles across state lines on 3 separate occasions to kill a woman she's never even met before. And each time she backed out, and Patrick, he was impatient. At this point, he was done waiting. So on November 22nd of 2018, it was Thanksgiving Day. And at around midday, Kelsey was at a grocery store, Safeway in Woodland Park, and she was with her daughter. They were just shopping for a Thanksgiving dinner. It was super normal. She was picking up ingredients specifically for a sweet potato casserole. Like that was her thing for Thanksgiving that she loved to cook. And it seems like while she was shopping for ingredients for her casserole, it seems like that she was actively texting Patrick back and forth, asking him like, what exactly do we need for the casserole? Like, do you want anything else? Stuff like that. Very, very normal. She puts the groceries in her car, buckles Kaylee up in the backseat, and then drives home. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, while that was happening, Patrick was doing his own preparation for Thanksgiving in some ways. He made a stop at a drive-through ATM, and a surveillance camera there actually picked this up. So we're able to see through this that he had a black plastic tote in the back of his truck. And if you don't know what a tote is, it's literally like a crate. I don't know. I've never heard the word totes before, so I also had to search that up. And this will become a significant detail later on, so keep this in mind. But after Patrick had done this and he had this weird black plastic tote in the back of his truck, he drove over to Kelsey's townhouse that Thanksgiving afternoon. Kaylee was also there, and when Patrick entered the home, he decided to, say hi to Kaylee, but then placed her into a different room away from them in the living room. And Kelsey didn't think too much of it. She's just putting the groceries away. They're having a little chat. And then kind of out of nowhere, Patrick is like, hey, let's play a game. And Kelsey's taken back by this. She's like, there's so much I have to do right now, but okay, I'll entertain this. Like, what game are we gonna play? And Patrick basically tells her, stand right there. I'm gonna go get something. And he comes back with a sweater and is like, I'm gonna tie this around you and I'm gonna blindfold you. Now, Kelsey's thinking okay, maybe he's trying to initiate, some intimacy between them. So she's kind of playing along with all of this. So Patrick blindfolds her. She's standing in the middle of the living room, completely unsuspecting. And Patrick basically tells her, okay, you're blindfolded, so you can't see, but I'm going to have different candles with different scents, and you have to guess each scent. So Kelsey's like, all right. She stood there blindfolded, and, she's thinking, okay, this is just a weird little game he wants to play with me. So she's standing there, she's waiting, and Patrick comes up from behind her, baseball bat in his hands, and whacks her so hard over the back of her head, and she just completely collapses to the ground. And then he continues to beat her to death with it and continues to hit her in the head around 10 to 15 times, to the point where he was sure she was no longer breathing. And her last words were, "Please stop." And as this was happening, their daughter was in the next room the entire time. Now, this is such a brutal way to take someone out. It's so violent. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's crazy to me that Patrick had asked Crystal to do this for him, right? To beat Kelsey to death with a baseball bat or a metal pipe, and told Crystal, hey, make sure there's not too much blood. Yet here he is doing the most brutal, violent thing to someone to kill them. There's blood all over the place. It goes everywhere. And you can tell by his method, he didn't just want to get rid of Kelsey, he wanted to hurt her. The amount of energy it takes to really kill someone in that manner, it's so brutal, and it takes a lot out of you. So he clearly had a lot of rage against Kelsey. And when this horrific act was over, just like so many times before, Patrick calls Crystal to come and help him, clean up and basically do his dirty work for him because he just couldn't do it alone. So he calls her, and he doesn't tell her what, happened. All he says is, you need to come over right now and you need to help me clean something up. And she's like, okay, I'm coming. Now, as Crystal is on the way to Kelsey's townhouse, because again, she has to drive 12 hours from Idaho, Patrick goes to work pretty much immediately. He gets her body and places it in the black plastic tote that was in the back of his truck. And then he continues to drive to his family's home in Florissant, which is a 40-minute drive. So he gets there at around 2:30 p.m. Later that evening, he's already having Thanksgiving dinner with his family, and he's completely normal. He's totally calm, like nothing even happened. So no one in his family suspects anything at all. And over Thanksgiving weekend, Patrick uses Kelsey's phone to make it seem like she was still alive by pretending to be her. He was texting her employer, texting her family and friends, and basically telling everyone, like, hey, I need to take some time off. Like, I just need some space for myself. Like, please leave me alone, basically. And not only that, he went so far to have conversations with himself. He would use her phone to text himself things like, hey, I'm going running. I'll call you guys when I'm home. And he would respond to Kelsey being like, okay, be safe. And he faked 19 calls from her phone to his phone and vice versa, basically making it look like they're actively communicating throughout the entire weekend to make it seem like she's still alive. So no one suspected anything for a little while. Now, 2 days after the murder on November 24th, I'm going to assume it took Crystal 2 days to get to Colorado because it's a really long drive and whatnot. And Patrick obviously told her to come prepared because she's going to be cleaning something. So she came over with a bunch of stuff, cleaning supplies, and she enters into Kelsey's townhouse. And as soon as she walks in, oh my God, it's like something out of a horror film. Like, there is blood everywhere, all over the floor. And it's not just a pool of blood, there's splatter of blood everywhere, all over the walls, the curtains, on the floor. Blood is seeped into the carpet. Like, blood is literally in the other room as well. Like, it's all over the place. And Patrick, gives her bleach and more cleaning supplies and is pretty much like, get to work. So he leaves. We don't know what he's up to, but she's basically scrubbing that house for hours, cleaning everything, like making sure everything is spotless. But she leaves a small spot of blood, and it's in a place that's really easy to miss, but it's possible to find if you're looking for something, if you're looking for it. Now, whether or not she did this intentionally, we don't actually know for sure, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on. Now, after they had cleaned Kelsey's townhouse and Kelsey's body was at Patrick's ranch, this was when Patrick decided, like, okay, we need to get rid of her remains. We need to get rid of the evidence. So he sets her body on fire and burns it. And he's just standing there watching Kelsey's body burn, and Crystal was there too. But things weren't over just yet because Patrick had one final task for Crystal: bring Kelsey's phone with you and take it to Idaho. So, this is exactly what Crystal does. She takes Kelsey's phone, I think her ID as well, and she is seen driving out of Colorado on November 25th. And the reason why that we know this is because later on in the investigation, they're tracking Kelsey's phone, and the last ping that they see from her phone is in Gooding, Idaho. And then afterwards, nothing. Now, obviously, this is what we know, but at the time, no one knew where Kelsey was, where her phone was, where her last known location was. People knew nothing. All they assumed was that she needed some time away, and she was still kind of actively texting people throughout Thanksgiving weekend. But then after that, it was radio silence from her, right? So Kelsey's mom, Cheryl Barrett, like, she hasn't really been in the picture so far in our story, but she's very close with her daughter, and she hadn't heard back from Kelsey since Thanksgiving morning. Slowly, concern starts to arise because as the days pass, Cheryl is still trying to be in contact with her daughter, and Kelsey's been quite inactive since Thanksgiving, isn't really responding. So obviously, mother's intuition and knowing that this is very unusual for Kelsey because they're always chatting. On December 2nd, around 10 days after Thanksgiving, this is when Cheryl decides to call the police. And she's like, no, okay, it's been long enough now where like something is clearly very wrong and I need someone to go over to her house and make sure that she's okay. So that's exactly what happened. They go over to her townhouse and they check it out and they don't find anything. Like, they're like, wow, I mean, the place looks really clean and there's nothing here, nothing suspicious. So nothing really happens from that, and they kind of just move on. Now, because the police was doing a welfare check on Kelsey and she's kind of nowhere to be found, obviously the first thing that they do is call her fiance Patrick, and they call him over the phone. It's kind of an informal conversation. They're mostly just trying to figure out what his perspective on things is. Like, when was the last time you saw Kelsey? When was the last time you spoke to her? And Patrick tells the police that Kelsey and him actually broke up the day before Thanksgiving, and Patrick did see Kelsey on Thanksgiving Day, but that was only to return some belongings to her and also because they were going to do an exchange of their daughter. And then after that, he went home to his ranch in Florissant for Thanksgiving dinner, and that was that. Like, that was his story that he told the police, right? So at this point, even though Kelsey is kind of nowhere to be found and it seems like no one's really heard from her from Thanksgiving, the police can't really do much because no crime has actually been committed. So from this point onwards, the police is not really involved anymore. But Cheryl has a really strong feeling that something is just so wrong, because she's like, well, it's weird that Patrick told the police that they broke up the day before Thanksgiving. But Cheryl is like, if that was really the case, Kelsey would have definitely told her mom that their engagement ended. I mean, that would be pretty serious. It's not like they're just breaking up. They have a child together and they were engaged. So Cheryl decides to take some initiative and go over to Kelsey's townhouse herself. And she brings her son, Kelsey's brother, Clint. So they enter the home and they notice that it's really clean. Cheryl specifically noticed that the fridge had been recently cleaned. Like, she can still see the white marks, which means that it was cleaned recently. But that's weird because Kelsey has been, kind of missing for 10 days. So they're kind of looking around the townhouse, and Clint goes into the bathroom. And when he enters, he's looking around, he's even looking under things. And suddenly he notices it: small bits of blood at the base of the toilet. And even though this is such a small thing, like, you could miss this very easily, but it's still possible to find. It was enough for them to be like, okay, alarm bells are going off. Like, this means something is not right here. We're going to call the police again. So they call the police go over to the townhouse and they test the blood, and they were right. It was confirmed to have belonged to Kelsey Barrett. So at this point, from December 2nd to December 14th, from the time that Cheryl called in a welfare check on Kelsey, an investigation is taking place, and it's no longer a missing persons situation. This is now a homicide investigation because they found that blood. So at this point, this is when they start going through things, phone records, surveillance footage. And this is when they also start looking into Patrick a little bit more because, come on, let's be real. In cases like this, they always look at the boyfriend or the husband or the partner first, right? Because when police first talked to Patrick, he claimed they broke up before Thanksgiving. Then they did a quick meetup on the day of Thanksgiving, but the evidence shows something completely different. One of the surveillance cameras they look into is a neighbor security camera that lives next door to Kelsey, because their camera is kind of pointed towards Kelsey's front door in a way, so you can kind of see when people go in and out. And on Thanksgiving Day, that camera was activated 27 times. And out of 27 times, Patrick appeared on it 11 times, which goes to show that he was there for way longer than he had claimed. He wasn't there very quickly to just exchange items and their daughter. He was there for several hours because he was captured on camera multiple times going in back and forth. So that's weird. That doesn't make sense. And there's also the cell phone records because they looked into it and they could see that Kelsey and Patrick's phone was traveling together on Thanksgiving Day, but he had claimed that they were not together. And then that's when 3 days later, they see her phone moving west out of Colorado into Idaho. So you have all of that going on. And then you also have the text messages throughout the Thanksgiving weekend where it just didn't seem like Kelsey. When they looked into the way that she was texting, it did not seem like her. Something was very off. Cheryl, her mother, agreed as well. And so, because they had all of these things, at this point, Patrick was becoming the primary suspect. Like, he was just looking super, super sus. So they started really looking into him. Now, the phone being pinged in Idaho was obviously a very big lead for the investigation because they were able to follow this trail, which led them to Crystal Kenny. And I want to say that while I was researching this case, I couldn't really figure out how exactly they were able to connect those two dots, like the phone location to Crystal. But what makes the most sense to me is that if they were investigating Patrick and going through all of his electronics, they probably found out at some point that he was seeing another woman, Crystal. And then from there, it wouldn't really take too much to figure out that, Crystal lived in Idaho. And if the phone is pinging from Idaho and his girlfriend's in Idaho, right? So investigators go over to Crystal and they question her, trying to figure out what she knows. And she lies. She says that she doesn't know who Kelsey is and that she hadn't seen Patrick for over a month and a half. But very soon after her first claim, the FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation show up at her front door with a search warrant in hand, requesting DNA swabs for testing, telling her that they know that she lied to them. We keep in mind that Crystal has obviously done everything for Patrick this far. She's lied for him. She's cleaned up a crime scene for him. Like, she's drove many, many hours for him. Like, she's done so much for him. And this time, now that the full force of the police are at her front door, she broke down, and this was, it seems like, when she reached her limit, and she told them everything, every detail, everything she told them. And she decided to fully cooperate with the police in their investigation against Patrick. As for the things that she told the police, I'm going to summarize some of it. She told them the three requests: the coffee, metal pipe, the baseball bat. She told them how she had to drive, thousands of miles across state lines on his behalf, and how she was never able to go through with any of the requests. She told them that she had to clean the apartment, how she cleaned the apartment. She told them that she intentionally left a little blood splatter, that she watched Patrick burn Kelsey's body, that she took her phone to Idaho and destroyed it because Patrick asked her to. She told them every single thing. She even took the investigators to Kelsey's house and gave them a full tour as to how everything looked when she first came in, where the blood was splattered, how she cleaned everything up. Her cooperation was the biggest thing that police needed at this point to catch Patrick in this crime. And they did acknowledge that they were making a deal with the devil in some ways. And the police realistically didn't want to give Crystal, like, this type of person, an easy way out because she was involved in this murder in so many ways, right? Like, not once did she actually try and save Kelsey. She was just always hesitant, perhaps, probably, for her own self-preservation. Like, she just couldn't go through with it. But they had no body. And without a body, Crystal's testimony was the only solid thing that they had to make sure that they could really put Patrick away forever. So after they had Crystal's testimony and the details of everything that happened, they arrested Patrick Frazee on December 21st, 2018, and he was charged with first-degree murder and related offenses, and he pleaded not guilty. But the thing is, right, when he was in prison awaiting trial, he was still up to no good, and he was still working on a plan to make sure that this case against him would never make it to court. And he did this by getting an inmate of his to do his dirty work for him. And basically, he wanted this inmate to kill 3 people for him: Crystal Kenny, her best friend Michelle Stain, probably because Michelle also knew a lot about the situation in Patrick, and Kelsey's mother, Cheryl Barrett. Pretty much the 3 people who was most capable of putting him away. And the thing is, this inmate that he, asked to kill these people for him didn't go through with it. and instead brought 16 handwritten notes to prosecutors. And these notes were written on like paper towels and napkins and was basically the full detail of how Patrick wanted this guy to kill these women for him. It's almost just like, I almost want to laugh because of just how insanely ridiculous this is. Like this guy is stupid. I'm just gonna straight up say it like this guy was dumb. So this was clearly a man who not only tried to recruit his girlfriend to kill his fiance for him, literally the mother of his child as well. He's potentially facing life in prison at this point for these crimes, and yet he's still trying to do it again. But thankfully, that didn't go through, and prosecutors found out about it, so they added 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder to his charges. So when the trial began in November of 2019, it was quite different from other murder trials because they had no body, they had no murder weapon. The prosecution's star witness was literally Crystal. Like her testimony was their main thing. Crystal took the stand and she told the jury everything in full detail. And she also mentioned how she left that little blood splatter very intentionally to make sure that someone would be able to find it and do something about the situation. And, it seemed like a lot of people really did believe Crystal did this on purpose, even though she helped Patrick cover up the murder. Part of her was still actively working against him, it seems, but the defense claimed that this was more of a self serving thing, her leaving those blood splashes, rather than something that she did out of the goodness of her heart or because she truly wanted justice for Kelsey. It's a big debate for this case. People are arguing both sides. At the end of the day, we're never really going to know for sure. Prosecutors also completely dismantled Patrick's claim that Kelsey had been abusing their daughter. There was literally no evidence for this whatsoever. And it seemed like that he only used this as a justification to basically manipulate Crystal into helping him. So on November 19th of 2019, the jury came back after hours of deliberation and they found Patrick Frazee guilty on all counts. 2 counts of first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years for remaining charges. At sentencing, the judge made it very clear that this was one of the most calculated cold-blooded crimes he had ever encountered because Patrick spent months trying to recruit his girlfriend to kill his fiance, spent months planning her death, only to brutally beat her to death with a baseball bat while their daughter was literally in the next room over. Now, Kelsey's mom, Cheryl, asked that Patrick's parental rights be fully removed, and that was granted. So Kaylee is going to be raised by Cheryl and their family. And as for post-sentencing, Patrick did try to appeal multiple times, but they all failed. And it's crazy because he maintains his innocence. He even wrote letters saying, like, I want nothing more than to find out what happened to Kelsey. It's just BS. Like, I don't like this guy. I mean, I don't think anyone likes this guy. He's dumb and it's just crazy to me. Now, because Kelsey's body was never recovered, this case became one of the most notable examples of a successful no-body homicide prosecution in pretty much recent American legal history. The prosecution side was able to build their entire case without a body or even a murder weapon, and they purely relied on forensic evidence. But most importantly, they also relied on the woman who drove thousands of miles to help cover up the crime, destroy evidence. And it's crazy how she was involved in this in so many ways, but it was her testimony that they needed to put Patrick away. But the question that we're left with is, did Crystal really want justice for Kelsey? Or was she just preserving herself and just wanted to stay out of prison? Now, obviously, this case has so many questions surrounding that, but she did plead guilty to tampering with physical evidence and she received 3 years in prison in February of 2019. However, she successfully appealed and was resentenced to just 18 months. And then she was released in March of 2021 and she served less than 2 years. For now, Kaylee is being raised by the Barrett family and Cheryl is dedicated to making sure that she will grow up knowing the exact type of woman that Kelsey was. Now, I personally think that Crystal did what she did out of self-preservation. I don't really care that she worked with the police and gave a full testimony. Sure, I'll credit her a little bit, but I honestly think that's the bare minimum considering the fact that she never once tried to save Kelsey. She didn't do anything. She was completely passive and complacent, and I just don't respect her at all. A lot of people also seem to share this opinion with me, going through conversations online about this. People were saying that she deserved way more time in prison, and I agree. She literally helped him cover up a crime, a murder. But in the end, we will never know for sure if Crystal was lying or not about like leaving those blood splatters. We will never know. But what did you guys think? If you have any thoughts about this case or about Crystal overall, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to know what you guys think. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you like my content, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. For now, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.